Welcome to Darwin's Rejects. People surviving in the dumbest way possible. I've found several cases I thought was interesting that I want to share with you. And what better way to start than someone from Florida? So without further ado, let's go. Who doesn't love the fresh scent of nicely fragrant candles? I do. It's a nice way to freshen up a room. But it probably isn't the best idea to try to freshen up your car that way. In other words, do not drive lit, or with a lit candle. According to the fire department's Facebook page, the fire started after a fragrance candle that was burning in the man's car tipped over onto some papers and it caught fire. Well, the man driving stopped his car, ran for a trash can to fill it with water, but when he got back, the car was engulfed in flames. Well, fire and EMS crews say that they were able to put out the fire, but unfortunately, they were not able to save the car. The fire destroyed it completely. Thankfully, no one was injured. Unfortunately for him, insurance doesn't cover stupidity as much. As cool as it sounds to have a piece sticking out of your pants, some at least, it's not safe. Take, for example, this beautiful human being. The police were called regarding a person who was shot with 2 gunshot wounds, one to his right thigh and one to his penis. About the same time, 2 employees at a hot dog stand called 911 to report that their restaurant had been robbed. A man was wearing a dark hooded sweater with a dark scarf to conceal his face. He robbed the shop using a small caliber pistol. The man entered the lobby, pulled out the firearm, and demanded money from the cash register. The 2 men, aged 39 and 45, who were working at the restaurant, complied with him. Then the robber proceeded to reach into the 39-year-old man's pocket, take out his cell phone and his wallet, then went to run off. The whole thing was caught on video. The 2 employees told him that when he ran off from the restaurant, he tried to put the gun down his pants, then it went off. It shot him in the groin, but regardless, he kept running, somehow. What happened is when he got far enough away, he called 911 for himself, because he'd been shot. After being treated for that, he faces 2 counts of armed robbery with a firearm. Yeah, that's another way to get a piercing. I don't think I'd want a piercing, though, that you can fit one of those big gauges that you put in your ear. That's just me, though. The thing about wild animals is that they are wild. If you're not sure what that means, just remember, don't try to interact with them. Domesticated animals are the only ones that you can venture contact with, and even then you need to be careful. Here's a good example of a girl that was lucky enough to not get the full brunt of her stupidity come back on her. The woman was seen trying to pet a massive moose as onlookers screamed at her to stop. And when I say massive, I mean this moose on all 4s, not reared up on his hind legs, stands over 7 feet tall, and those things can be 1,200 pounds. Yes, they can ruin your day, as in it will be your last day. Well, at one point, you could hear her say that she was going to back away. Then the video shows the moose lean back on his back legs and throw his hooves up at the woman. Fortunately, the moose was only warning her to back off, and he didn't pursue to attack her. Otherwise, this would be a full-on Darwin Award. When you have plumbing issues, people snake their pipes to clear out the blockages. That goes for our home, not the living. Sure, your body is mentioned as a temple, but that's not literal. And when I say snake, I didn't mean literal either. Well, one man in China found himself on the operating table after swallowing live eels because he believed that it would help him with his constipation. Only for the small sea creatures, well, not really that small, to tear through his intestines and caused a serious infection. He was complaining about intense abdominal pain. No crap, right? You know, that didn't start out as a pun, but sure, let's go with it. And the staff recognized that his body was going into shock. Well, a CT scan showed the skeleton of eels in his abdominal cavity. He was sent to emergency surgery to remove them. The doctor said that he opened them up, and he noticed a large amount of fecal matter mixed with water and blood. Yeah, that's kind of gross. Sorry for the gross imagery. He said there was severe swelling because they found 2 very thick swamp eels. They were said to also measure a 2-centimeter hole in his colon, and they found another one in his intestines. They both required fixing. That's 2 holes the size of a penny. They said the patient was lucky because if he didn't seek medical attention when he did, he would have got a really serious infection that is definitely fatal. Unfortunately for one eel, it died, but one was lucky enough to survive with some very disturbing tales to tell his friends. I believe there's a lot of benefits when it comes to an exercise routine. As a matter of fact, yoga is a good one. It also has a good way to improve your mood, physically, and arguably spiritually. I still wouldn't recommend taking it to the extremes because it won't help you attain ascension quicker unless you're trying to see what's on the other side of life. A photograph was taken of a female college student doing extreme yoga before plummeting 6 stories. She lost her balance and she fell from the 6th floor of an apartment building. This caused her to break 110 bones. She had to undergo 11 hours of surgery and also have 2 months of recovery. The hospital is amazed that she's recovering so well. She attributes the positive prayers and vibes and also believes that her positive attitude is the reason for her quick recovery. That might be so, but you wouldn't need it if you took your training regimen down a notch. 2 men had to be rescued after driving into a raging river because their GPS told them to. The GPS wasn't wrong per se, but it was a road that had frequent floods, and it was clearly marked with warning signs saying to avoid it when it's flooded. Well, their flatbed truck was covered in water up past the wheel well, and it had to be winched out of waters that were rushing up to 70 miles an hour. Them and their dog and the truck were saved. The rescuers were amazed at their stupidity and said it would have killed them if it was a few inches deeper. I think it's admirable to show compassion to animals. It's heartwarming to see people saving wildlife despite the dangers to themselves. But that's the key in my opinion. Yourself. A woman in Colorado stopped to help an injured bobcat. She wrapped it up in a blanket and put it in the back seat of her SUV next to her 3-year-old child. She had the sense to call wildlife authorities and asked what to do. They promptly told her to remove herself and her child from the vehicle. When they got there, they had trouble removing the wild animal from the vehicle without injury. If you remember anything from this, just remember that small children, they look like food to wild animals that are carnivores. Now I'm very impressed with old people that can keep the flame going in their love life after the age of 90. Well, this one 96-year-old man called 911 asking for the fire department, and he admitted to the dispatcher that he accidentally activated a flamethrower. Yes, a flamethrower from World War II while penetrating his wife. I'm not really sure of the logistics of that, but I'd rather not ask. Well, they made it out of the house safely without injury, but unfortunately the house could not be saved. It turns out that in their lovemaking, also involved was a Gatling gun and a rocket launcher. Actually, it sounds like my wife's mother's side of the family. As a matter of fact, that's all I'm going to say about that. I have to admit the gas prices are pretty insane, but I think it's terrible to try to steal it from others. They're suffering from the same plight as you, and if they're not, just ask. There's a lot of nice people out there that's willing to help out. Otherwise, this can happen to you. Police are investigating a case where someone during the night tried to siphon gas from a tour bus. Unfortunately for them, and fortunate for the bus owner, they mistook the sewage drain as the gas tank. As you might be aware, when you siphon something, you have to suck on the hose to draw it from the tank. So it draws the gas up before physics takes over and it keeps flowing. Well, this person, they must have got a mouthful of excrement. They still haven't found the culprit, but I don't think they're going to investigate too hard, seeing that they couldn't punish them more than they already have been by straw feeding themselves liquid poo. Power outages suck. I had to deal with one for 3 weeks during a bad ice storm. Thankfully, we were prepared. We had candles, along with canned goods and other things to sustain ourselves. It's best not to guess what you're using to try to solve your lighting problems. Take for example this family. During a power outage, one family didn't have the necessary equipment to deal with it. So they decided to find some candles so that they can light up their surroundings. Unfortunately, they did not have any, and the hardware stores were closed. So in a moment of inspiration or desperation, the mother of two decided to look for some in the basement, which they had stuff from the previous residence. Instead of questioning what she found, she decided they must be candles. They're long, cylindrical, and they have a wick, right? Well, she lit it up and had a very surprising outcome when it decided to explode in her face. This candle was actually a stick of dynamite. She was sent to the hospital with some serious injuries. She survived, and also, She was the only one that suffered any injury. The rest of the family was fine. Thank you all for joining me for this edition of Darwin's Rejects. Hope you guys enjoyed these. I haven't done this in a while, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I want to give a special thanks to my patrons. Your help is greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening, and until next time, this is Dallas, signing off.